Good afternoon to all. A very warm welcome to this online 2021 Paul Love Endowment Lecture. SCILET's annual Paul Love Endowment Lecture series commemorates Paul Linder Love's enormous, life-changing contributions in humanities education. His total dedication to the student community in his role as a teacher is both inspiring and worth emulating. I personally feel honored to have been associated with him as a student first, and then as a co-worker in creative writing and resource building. His student-centric approach demonstrated his reverence for teaching learning experience. Also equally and truly enjoyable was the way he would show his irreverence for the set patterns. We are extremely delighted to welcome Mr. Prakash Karat. He will give this year's Paul Love Endowment Lecture. He is one of India's leading politicians. He is the author of 5 books whose themes range from nationalism, Marxism, language, and politics. We are privileged to have Mr. Prakash Karat for this year's Paul Love Endowment Lecture. He will speak on the topic, threats to secularism and their implications for literature and art. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
I welcome the principal and secretary of the American College, retired professors of the American College, professors from other institutions, researchers, and students to this endowment lecture. I am very happy to welcome the old students of postgraduate and research department of English, who have had the good fortune of experiencing Paul Love's unparalleled nobility. A special word of welcome to Mr. Bill Richardson, the grandson of Mr. Zombro. We are very happy that you could join us for this endowment lecture.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. We thank the principal and secretary, Dr. Davamani Christober, for his constant support to SCILET activities. We thank him for encouraging all students to reconnect with the college. He is a big admirer of Paul Love and his service to the college. Your encouragement of Paul Love Endowment Lecture means a lot to SCILET and to the old students of PG English Department. Thank you, sir. May I now invite the principal to offer his felicitations. Sir, over to you.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to offer felicitation in the celebration of legendary teacher and noblest of human beings, Dr. Paul Linder Love. This annual event gives me immense joy because people from different sections of society, professions, and different age groups come together in the name of Paul Love. Some participants have been his lucky students. Some may have known him briefly. I feel truly privileged to have known Paul Love as a neighbor, both in workplace in the newly built Centenary Hall and also in the residential quarters on campus. I'm very happy that I joined the American College when I did. The growth of our friendship was seen in the way I was addressing him. It changed from Dr. Paul Love, Dr. Love to Paul G. The way he addressed me changed from Dominic Christopher to Christy. I had the opportunity to watch Paulo's incredible life of giving and sharing from close quarters. Giving and sharing came very naturally to Paulo. My biggest regret is that I couldn't be Paul G's direct student. Students were close to his heart. The administrators had to wait if the students needed his attention. His students were so blessed by his care and company that they became objects of envy and resentment on campus. Paulo was both a very demanding and compassionate teacher. When exposed to Paul G's life on campus, the American college, we all had the opportunity to learn life's lesson and work ethic from him. I have related to Paulo as a fellow teacher, as a bursar, and also as the of the 140 years old the American college. It has been my special privilege to name the building that houses SCILET as Paul Linder Love Hall, PLL Hall, during my tenure as the principal. SCILET today is a highly sought after resource center, the only one of its kind in India or elsewhere. It's a unique institution built by volunteerism and team leadership. Institution building is not an individual accomplishment. I would be failing in my duty if I do not acknowledge the rich contribution of Professor Padmanabhan Nayarji, as we fondly called him. Paul G and Nayarji together lovingly built up the postgraduate department of English and SCILET. They inspired each other, but both of them were happy to give credit to others for the development of SCILET. Friends, many of our friends are here to witness today's program, including Bill Richardson, the grandson of the second principal of the American College, Reverend Zombro. During his tenure only, the college moved from the Pasumalai, the village Pasumalai, to the existing place. Thank you. Thank you, Bill Richardson. And we are privileged to have with us Prakash Karat to give the 2021 Paulo Endowment Lecture. If I have known Paulo from close quarters, I have admired Prakash Karat from a distance. A tall leader, a highly accomplished person who walks his talk and lives his principles. Yes, Prakash Karat, who walks his talk and lives his principles. The American College is very proud to have at least your virtual presence with us to honor our Paulo. I congratulate the SCILET team and the former students of Paulo for finding such an eminent speaker for this occasion. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I thank the SCILET team for taking Paulo's legacy forward. I also congratulate the team of sustaining the activities of SCILET of Indian literature, even when the pandemic has hit us all hard. You all made sure that none of the annual activities got suspended because of Corona. SCILET has thus helped to enhance the academic profile of the American College. I assure you of the college's continued support, SCILET and Pramila Paul, PPRI's Pramila Paul, and I hope that someday the college will be able to build an extension wing for SCILET for its further development. I also sincerely hope that Paulo Endowment Lecture 2022 could be arranged right here on campus that Paulo lived in and loved. I hope it will literally and physically be a homecoming event for all the former students of Paul G, as it used to be in the pre-COVID days. Congratulations to all once again. God bless.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your memories of Paul Love and for your encouragement. May I now invite Dr. Pramila Paul to introduce the program.
It has been a humbling experience to see the enthusiastic response of the Paul Love student diaspora to the Endowment Lecture Series. A special word of welcome to Guru Chahal, Ivy Chahal, and other Paul Love admirers from Punjab. I know that you are all in a celebratory mood for more than one reason. And Punjab had been Paul Love's very first home in India. and you all made Paul feel so wanted and loved till the very end. I thank the principal and secretary for encouraging us to conduct this program and for offering technical support. Organizing this event year after year has been an experience of reliving and reaffirming the egalitarian work culture that our Paul Love stood for and promoted. We always worked with Paul Love and with Nayarji rather than under them, right from planning to the execution of every project, every event in SCILET. Our arguments in SCILET would start with the designing of the invitation. The concept itself may come from Somasundaram. The execution of our fancy ideas will fall on our techies, Pavitra and David. Some of us may be tech illiterates, some semi-literates, but that does not really stop us from becoming more and more demanding. Ganesh Babu and Joel Timothy are born to disagree, born to argue. Resolving our divergent views to a point of consensus becomes Ebenezer Fenn's responsibility. Geeta Kanagaraj, Rani, and Jayalakshmi exercise their mediating skills to make sure that peace reigns in SCILET. SCILET team, nurtured by Paulji and Nayarji, is a group of argumentative Indians. You have to really watch us function to believe it all. We miss Paul Love in all that we plan, in all that we do, but he continues to be an unseen presence, an unseen motivator, and an unseen unifier. Paul Love believed in us, even in moments when we did not believe in ourselves. As the founder head of the postgraduate department of English and the founder director of SCILET, he was a perfect picture of positive energy. He gave us all hope, and he continues to do so. We are extremely delighted that we could manage to get Mr. Prakash Karat to give the 6th Paul Love Endowment lecture for many reasons. The first reason being, Paul Love had read Prakash Karat's articles and had appreciated them very much. Paul Love was a true secularist. Paul Love was a minimalist who never owned a television, mobile phone, laptop, or even an air conditioner in the hot Madurai. He never bolted the door to his house because there was really no need to do so. Paulji's awareness and knowledge of the world around him was through the print media. He never failed to read the articles of Gopal Krishna Gandhi, Shiv Vishwanathan, Brinda Karat, Sashi Kumar, T.M. Krishna, and of course, Prakash Karat. He discussed them all with us over lunch. The second reason is that Prakash Karat, we know, is someone who truly values student-teacher relationship and mentorship. As a very young student essayist, he could write and win his way to Tokyo Olympics. Prakash's shining stellar performance in academics and other activities won him the best student gold medal on graduation from the Madras Christian College. He made a mark wherever he went, the University of Edinburgh or JNU. As a true student, Prakash Karat internalized what he learned and specialized in. And that landed him in the field of politics. Armed with the desire and determination to transform society for the better and for all, he dared to step out of his comfort zone. The rest is history. The loss of the academic world was a gain of the political world. With his exemplary qualities and cultivated civility, he has shown to us that there is dignity in politics. There is human purpose in politics. In the highly polarized world of politics, Prakash Karat commands respect and even love across ideological divides. Prakash Karat used to figure in our conversations in the English department as well. His favorite English teacher, J. Vasantan, JV as we used to call him, was a big favorite of our students also. And he used to regale us with Prakash Karat stories, his love for language, literature, and books. Sir, you look a little mellowed now, or at least on screen, but JV has told us a number of stories about your wild Java motorbike rides to the movie theaters, even on rainy days, and a pillion rider clinging to you or the bike for life. Even your distinctive, lush white hair has not escaped our conversation. Turning gray at a fairly young age, you used to give confidence and better self-esteem to the white-haired and even the hairless in the English department. Your teacher, JV, had been our much valued colleague and friend of Paul Love for years. So I assume we too have a modest share of claims on you. We wholeheartedly thank you, Mr. Prakash Karat, for accepting our invitation. The SCILET team, under the leadership of David Jairaj and Pavitra, would now present a 3.5-minute video, to be precise, on Paul Love as part of this welcome session. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Prakash Karat.
Thank you. Right. Thank you.
May I now invite you to give the endowment lecture, please, sir?
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I thank Dr. Premila Paul for a very kind words of introduction. Principal Davamani Christopher, Dr. Premila Paul, Mr. Bill Richardson, present and past faculty members and students of the American College attending this meeting, and friends. I thank the Study Center for Indian Literature in English and Translation for inviting me to deliver the Paul L. Love Endowment Lecture for 2021. From all that I have heard, and by all accounts, Paul L. Love was an extraordinary teacher with a lifelong commitment to education. He was also special in the way he cared and paid attention to his students, and this earned him the love and affection of successive generation of students. And I am therefore very glad to deliver this lecture in his memory. I am going to speak to you today about the threats to secularism and their implications for literature and art. We are faced with a juncture in our country where the secular democratic principles and the secular democratic character of our Constitution is under severe attack. And we are witnessing a steady erosion of the secular principle that is embedded in our Constitution. And this is having a profound and deep effect on the lives and society. And art and literature, being a vital part of our society, is also suffering the adverse effects of this erosion of secularism in our country. When we talk about secularism, the basic concept of secularism is the separation of the state from the church, and the broader interpretation of the separation of the state from religion. This concept of secularism arose with the rise of the bourgeoisie and the industrial revolution, which took place in Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries, which also saw the overthrow of the old feudal monarchical order. And the origins of secularism lie in the period of Enlightenment, which reached its height in the 18th century, when the dominance of the aristocracy, the monarchy, and the church in the established order was questioned. And the Enlightenment emphasized humanity, the right of individuals, and reason. The age of reason in the 18th century ushered in the secular ideas of the polity and civil society, and the whole idea of secularity and rationality. It is this process of secularization of society which also came to India. And if we look at secularism in the Indian context, we see that it was the freedom struggle in India which united all people of all creeds, castes, and communities in the fight for independence. And to build a strong anti-imperialist movement, it required a secular, all-embracing political platform which could rise above religious and sectarian divisions. This was preceded and accompanied by Renaissance movements in different parts of the country, movements which opposed religious orthodoxy, caste hierarchies, and stressed on the equality of all human beings. The Bengal Renaissance movement of the 19th century, the anti-caste movements led by Periyar, the great social reformers, Jyotiba Phule, and later Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and the Renaissance movement in Kerala, exemplified by Sri Narayana Guru, are some of them. So it is this anti-imperialist freedom struggle and the social awakening due to the work of the social reformers that laid the foundation for secularism in India. However, distinct from the basic or core concept of secularism, which is the separation of the state and religion, in India we had another variety of secularism, which saw the state striving to treat all religions equally and give no preference for any one religion in particular. The Indian variant of secularism also recognized the plural and composite culture of India. However, this variety of secularism got eroded over the decades since independence. Successive governments sought to utilize vote banks based on communal and caste identities. Especially from the 1980s, the politics of compromise with the communal forces surfaced. By the turn of the 1990s, the forces of majoritarian communalism were poised to take the offensive, which unfolded in the form of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, leading to the demolition of the Babri Masjid in December 1992. Now, from this period onwards, we saw the threats to secularism growing due to the rise of majoritarianism, which goes by the ideology of Hindutva. for the past 7.5 years, we have a ruling party at the center which bases itself upon Hindutva, which is the ideology of majoritarianism. It is this anti-secular thought which poses the main threat to the secular principle embodied in the Constitution and the political system. We have seen over the years the government increasingly patronizing the religion of the majority community. As I speak, the Prime Minister of India is inaugurating the corridor for the Kashi Vishwanath temple in Varanasi, the corridor from the temple to the ghats on the Ganga river. Earlier on August the 5th, 2020, we saw the spectacle of the inauguration of the building of the Ram temple at Ayodhya, inaugurated by the Prime Minister, making it an official function. If the secular principle is getting eroded in the institutions under the Constitution, at the ground level, another process is going on, which is of the Hindutva forces represented by a range of outfits working to impose Hindutva values in society, violating and contravening the fundamental rights of citizens and the minorities. Today, in many parts of northern India, a person belonging to the Muslim minority is attacked if he is a street vendor and goes into a Hindu locality to sell his goods and wares. At random, people are picked up and made to shout Jai Shri Ram to show that they are not anti-national. You have heard about people who have been lynched because they have been accused of eating beef or having indulged in cow slaughter. And today, just miles out of Delhi, in Gurgaon, the right of Muslims to offer namaz every Friday, for which the administration itself had designated places for them to congregate. They are now being not allowed to do so. And the Chief Minister of the state has just declared that they're cancelling the permission for such congregations in public places. So this is the assault on secularism which is happening within society in various parts of the country. And the results of this desecularization process can be seen in the rising intolerance of minorities, whether they are Muslim or Christian. In the months of January to June this year, 6 months, there have been recorded instances of 300 attacks on Christians and their places of worship or congregations in our country. Right now, in your neighboring state of Karnataka, attacks are taking place on congregations for prayer of Christians. This is now becoming a commonplace occurrence all over the country, targeting of minorities. The hate campaign against the minorities is leading to violence against them. Whether, as I said, it is the allegation that they have been eating beef or they have been indulging in cow slaughter or love jihad. The undermining of the constitutional rights of equality of all citizens is now taking a formal shape, as we saw when the Citizenship Amendment Act was passed in 2019, where for the first time a religious criteria is also introduced for the conferment of citizenship. The attempts to establish the hegemony of Hindutva is undergoing. The rewriting of history, the revision of history textbooks in schools and colleges has already taken place in the BJP-ruled states. The attempts to homogenize the culture, to stamp out diversity, and to conform to the Hindu upper caste values is also an ongoing project. And along with that are the efforts to censor and curb literary and creative arts to conform to majoritarian values and sentiments. This is a picture which appears bleak, which I've drawn for you because you are still in a part of the country, in the south, in Madurai, where these forces are yet to become ascendant and to become politically dominant. But if you take the country as a whole, Hindutva has become the hegemonic force today. And people have to live under this new regime of Hindutva, which is being enforced also utilizing the machinery of the state. This desecularization process or anti-secular trends have had a direct impact on literature, art and culture. The growing intolerance of diversity and dissent is affecting creative writers and artists. Because the state is being run by a majoritarian force, weakening of secularism has a direct and adverse impact on literature, art, and culture. As pointed out earlier, it was the Enlightenment and those trends or processes in India which laid the basis for a secularized literature and arts. Before that, art and literature in India too was motivated by religiosity and religious motives. Art and literature were court-sponsored, that is, in the court of the kings or the monarchs. The theocratic order determined the limits of creative artists. It was in Europe in the age of reason, in the late 17th and the 18th century, that saw the rise of literature, art, music based on a new sensibility, a modernity based on reason and secularity. Secular literature became dominant in the 19th century and continued to be so since then. Historically, it was the period of the rise of capital, of nationalism and individualism. All the great literary works of the 19th and 20th centuries were of the genre of secular literature. In India too, modernity and secular literature reflected in social novels, poetry, music that arose in the latter half of the 19th century and the 20th century. In the 20th century, we also saw the new art form of the films, or the genre of the films or cinema. Now it is these broad currents of secular democratic culture that stands threatened today. The Hindutva forces and other fundamentalist forces have been targeting creative writers and artists. We saw 2 decades ago how the painter M.F. Hussain was hounded for his paintings. Some of them were themed around Hindu goddesses, and he had to live in exile, and he died in exile too. Now, with the Hindutva forces in power at the center since the year 2014, attacks on writers and artists have increased manifold. It was this hate campaign against creative artists and writers that led to the killings of M.M. Kalburgi, eminent literature in Kannada, Govind Pansare, writer and political activist of Maharashtra, and Narendra Dabholkar, who led a movement against superstition and obscurantism. All 3 were shot and killed by assassins who were linked or who are linked to right-wing Hindutva outfits. So far, in no case has there been a conviction in these 3 murders. The atmosphere of intolerance fostered by Hindutva has now become generalized or has encouraged other sectarian caste and communal interests. In Tamil Nadu, we saw how Perumal Murugan was sought to be silenced for a novel he had written in 2010. In Kerala, another writer, S. Harish, was targeted for a novel in which he is supposed to have offended upper caste Hindu sentiments. And in large parts of India today, the state and administration will not stand up for the freedom of speech and the rights of the creative artists. Now, why is this all happening? Increasingly, the state and its institutions are being run by those who subscribe to majoritarianism as represented by Hindutva. This, of course, also in reaction, we see extremism and fundamentalism growing among the minority communities too. A conscious effort is being made to mold society and culture based on a narrow sectarian worldview. No sphere of culture, popular culture, is spared. Even the Mumbai film industry, popularly known as Bollywood, is being targeted. By and large, the Bollywood film industry, the biggest in the world, has purveyed a secular ethos in its films. They have represented a composite culture, and even the language in the films has been Hindustani, a mixture of Hindi and Urdu. The top three actors of Bollywood are the three Khans: Shah Rukh Khan, Salman Khan, and Amir Khan. Now, this is found to be an intolerable situation for the Hindutvavadis. So no efforts are being spared to denigrate this film industry and to intimidate the top actors and producers by various means. The other threat to the secular and composite culture is the promotion of pseudoscience and anti-science views. After all, we have a prime minister who claimed that plastic surgery existed in India 5,000 years ago, since the elephant head of Ganesha, that is, I think, Vinayaka in Tamil Nadu, was placed on the head of Vinayaka through plastic surgery. And in the last Science Congress, Indian Science Congress, a university vice chancellor presented a paper claiming that jet fighters existed in India, in ancient India. We had jet-propelled planes in India and other technological innovations of that sort. So there is an assault on reason and rationality against science. And when that is the situation, you can understand what happens to creative artists and those who seek to write serious fiction or literary works. The state is bringing in new instruments to repress and regulate art and culture. There are many of them which are on the anvil. I'll just mention two. The Cinematographic Act, the act governing cinema production in our country, is being amended to do away with the appellate body which is there. That is the appellate body for which there is a censor board of India, and films are censored. And if there is some act of censorship on a film, the producer of the film can appeal to this board of appeal. That appellate board is now being abolished, which means only the government will be the appellate board. If somebody's film is censored, they used to go to the censorship appellate board against the decision of the censor board. But now that appellate board is being abolished. And if you see the new IT rules, the Information Technology Act rules, IT Act rules, they are meant to censor and curb the online news portals and websites which are flourishing in our country. So more and more cultural productions, media, the right of the freedom of expression, all are going to be curtailed or brought under government regulation. So as against this onslaught on the literary and cultural activists and productions, we are finding that resistance to this attack or these attacks are also happening. Some years back, when Govind Pansari and Kalburgi were killed, there were countrywide protests by artists, writers, intellectuals who came out in their hundreds and thousands all over the country. It led to some of the top writers in all Indian languages who had won state awards, literary awards of the state. They returned these awards in protest, saying that literary creation, literary artists are being brutally suppressed in this country. So we cannot have any state honors or state awards anymore. Even the efforts to silence Perumal Murugan and Harish were thwarted. Now, both these writers who said we are not writing or we will withdraw, Perumal Murugan announced that Perumal Murugan, the writer, is dead, has now started writing again, getting a wider readership and wider acclaim. So has happened with Harish in Kerala. So there is a vibrant resistance to these attacks on secularism and the right of creative writers, the freedom to write and the freedom to dissent. Even today, despite all the efforts made by the communal forces, the dominant trend in Hindi literature, the biggest language spoken in our country, and which is the Hindi states, which are the heart of the Hindutva upsurge. The dominant trend in Hindi literature is secular and espousing secular and composite values of our culture and focusing on real life issues and problems of the people, the social realities. This is the best in Hindi writing and Hindi literature today. none of the efforts of the Hindutva ideologues and political forces have been able to reverse this tradition, this progressive tradition in Hindi literature. So today, the defense of secularism is of prime importance. We have to understand the vital link between secularism and democracy in our country. Majoritarianism is not democracy. Rule by majority is not ruled by the majority community over the minorities. The test of a democracy is how it treats the minority, how it protects or defends the rights of the minorities, whether they are religious minorities or linguistic minorities or ethnic minorities. So if there is no secularism in India, democracy will not survive. It will become a Hindutva authoritarian state. And worse, the goal of the Hindutva forces, it will become a Hindu Rashtra. This will spell the ruin or the end of a secular democratic culture based on reason. So today, when we fight for secularism, we are actually fighting for democracy too. They go hand in hand in our country. We cannot have majoritarianism masquerade as democracy in our country. Then we would be in no way different from Pakistan or Turkey or many other countries where elections are held, you have elected governments, but those elected governments are exercising a majoritarian principle which actually suppresses democracy in their country. It is a form of authoritarianism which is established. The danger of our country heading towards that type of authoritarianism is very real today. So when we talk of defense of secularism, we are talking about defense of secular democracy, and it is only a secular democracy which can assure or ensure the conditions for the literature and arts and culture to thrive and prosper. So the battle has to be joined today between the forces of reaction, unreason, bigotry, and communalism on the one side, and the secular, progressive, democratic, and rational forces on the other. All of us, as citizens of this great country, cannot remain neutral in this battle and must join the good fight. The life and work of Paul L. Love is as an educationist, as a teacher in Punjab and later in Tamil Nadu, exemplify all that is good in a secular democratic society. And if we are paying tribute to his memory today, we should be able to stand up for those values which he exemplified. And in our country today, no citizen can stand aside when this battle is being fought. And I hope that all of us will collectively work to preserve and strengthen secular democracy in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your speech. Thank you for reviving our commitment to secularism. Before we move on to Q&A, I thank Professor Jarman, Francis Jarman from Hildesheim University, Germany, and Mr. Tulsiraj Ravilla of Aravind Eye Care System for your participation. And Prakash Karat has kindly agreed to take a few questions. Please keep your questions short, and you may type your questions in the chat box, and we will call your name. The first question will be asked by Dr. C. Muthuraja of the American College. The host here will unmute you, sir. You can ask your question.
My two questions, I must professionally thank a very, very valuable presentation by Dr. Karat. First,
Can you just repeat the question for me?
sir,
I can't hear very well.
He just thanks you for your professional presentation. The questions that he has raised are, how do we stop corporatization of and the government dictated literature? Number two, there are threats for indigenous and autonomous cultural practices from sponsored and global institutions. How do we protect and preserve them?
I think the threat from corporatization or corporate interests taking over literary production or literature is not so acute yet in India. I think the problem is more due to the attitude of the state and the sectarian forces in our country who do not want to see any literature develop or be produced based on progressive secular values. This is the greatest threat to literary work or literary creation in India right now. Of course, for the development of a democratic culture or a democratic literature, democratic in the sense of you have independent creative efforts in literature, you may face in the coming days threats from corporatization. But I think that that threat is not so potent yet. For instance, the publishing industry in India is still not got concentrated in very big publishing houses, particularly in our Indian languages. We have a variety of publishing houses, and it is not monopolized by corporate publishing houses yet. But this can come. The trend is towards developing towards that. But I think that right now, the main threat is from the state and regressive forces who do not want writers or novelists to exercise their sovereign right to create what they want, you see, the interference in that. As far as threats to indigenous and other literary or cultural efforts and forms, yes, as globalization has increased and you have market forces dominating this under neoliberal capitalism in the world, you're finding a tendency to homogenize and standardize cultural productions, you see, which undermine or threaten local and indigenous cultural forms of production or literary productions. That is something, again, which is related to your first question, that globalization and corporatization, which is rampant today, will have to be resisted, or writing or literary work protected from. In some places, we already have very good cooperative efforts to publish books and also to market these books. In some states, I know my state, Kerala, we have very strong cooperatives now, publishing cooperatives, and also a large network of libraries run on a cooperative basis, which ensures that there is a market for all these cooperative efforts. So we have to find ways to fend off the onslaught of globalized corporate capital taking over or assimilating the diverse and local cultural indigenous productions or efforts. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Dr. Geeta Kanagaraj.
Yep. Yes.
In the context of secularism, what is your opinion of withdrawal of texts from the university syllabuses?
Withdrawal of?
Literary texts from university syllabuses.
That is also happening. It is assuming different forms in different places, but literary texts today, what you might say in university curricula, if the university sets its own, curricula and text, you're finding external pressures or interference to change this. Many years ago, I'm not sure of the time, but at least a decade ago, in Delhi University, for example, A.K. Ramanujam's book was removed, on the, what is it called, on the Ramayana, the 900 versions of the Ramayana, or whatever it was called. It was removed under protest externally from the university. So this is part of the intolerance and the increasing aggressive posture adopted by communal forces who would like to see that texts which are not to their taste or liking are removed. And unfortunately, in most cases, universities are not able to withstand this pressure coming from external sources. So, or because the state governments there are not supportive of the universities, protecting their autonomy to decide on what texts or books that should be prescribed in the syllabi or in the curriculum. That is happening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Next question is by Albert. Albert, can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So, why in India is football celebrated in states where communism is popular? Because in states such as, why in India, a sport like football is much more played or celebrated in states where communism is popular?
Yes, I think football is a more collective game, you see. And if you see the origins of football in the world, it is more a proletarian sport than cricket, for example. cricket is a very middle-class game, even in England. You see. Well, football is a game, a sport for the masses, you see. It's the masses who go to watch football in England and Europe, you see. So football has always had a more proletarian character. And so I think that both in Kerala and Bengal, football is highly popular among the people, where the left movement or the communist movement has also been strong. But I think you cannot really stretch that to make it into a principle saying, you know, football and communism go side by side. But it is definitely a game which is much more attractive to the working people. And if you see the origin of some of the football clubs in England, you'll find that it was actually connected with some trade or craft, you know, people who are in a type of plumbers, you know, they would form a club and they would field a football team. So you had always this character about football, which somehow excited the passions of the people and particularly the working people. So I think that there's some reflection of that popularity of football in places like Kerala and West Bengal.
It is so true of Latin American countries also.
Sorry?
It is so true of Latin American countries.
Yeah, that's so true of Latin American, exactly.
Where cricket is almost non-existent.
Yes, correct. You're right.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Anything more?
Dr. Yeah, we have a question from Dr. Christina Rebecca. Can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Yeah. Sir, trade unionism in India, which carried India through the first phase of globalization, seems to have lost its hold in the current phase of privatization. Is there a hope for workforce in the present scenario?
Yeah, I would again, please help me by repeating the question.
Yeah, I'll repeat, sir.
Yeah.
Trade unionism, which
Yes.
carried India through its first phase of globalization, seems to have lost its hold in the current phase of privatization. Is there a hope for future workforce?
Future
Workforce,
workforce.
yes.
Well, I couldn't fully get the question.
I will read
somebody
the question
repeat
for
it.
you, sir.
Yeah, please help me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Trade
Please read it.
unionism, which
You
carried
please repeat.
India. Yeah, I'll read again. Trade unionism, which carried India through the first phase of globalization, seems to have lost its hope in the current phase of privatization. How do we make them relevant in the present? Is there hope for the future workforce?
Yeah, right. You see, the trade union movement in India is facing a similar problem or crisis as the trade union movement in most of the advanced capitalist countries, if I may put it that way. Because the restructuring of the industry, the production processes, and the restructuring of the workforce, all this has posed a severe challenge to the trade union movement in Europe and America, etc. It's a fact that trade union membership has declined in most of the advanced capitalist countries. That's because after globalization, there has been a shift of relocation of industries from the developed world to the developing countries. That's one part of it. The other is the nature of the work or the type of work, the contractual work, for example. There's an enormous increase in contractual and casualized work. So they constitute the bulk of the workforce in the country today. And it is, as you know, more difficult to organize and unionize contract and casual workers. So all these problems are now affecting the trade union movement in our country. But unlike in the West, industry is not declining or stagnating in our country. Industrial expansion will continue to take place because we are a developing country. Only the problem is that under globalization and neoliberalism, the permanent workforce who get social security benefits, etc., that is getting reduced, and the unorganized sector and the contractual and casual work, that workforce is increasing. So in India now, serious efforts are being made to organize, one, the contractual workforce and the casual workforce, and two, in the unorganized sector, or what is called the informal sector, workforce is sought to be organized. At that juncture, we are having this big onslaught of privatization. Now, privatization of public sector enterprises, the big industries, will naturally weaken the trade union movement because they are the vanguard in the trade union movement, the organized permanent workforce in the public sector enterprises. So this is a big challenge, as you say. Privatization will lead to weakening of the trade unions, because public sector enterprises at least cannot take union breaking activities. They cannot indulge in trade union suppression of trade unions. But in the private sector, of course, they will make serious efforts to see that workers do not have trade unions or get trade union rights. So it becomes more difficult. So the current privatization drive, which is just begun now with the announcement of privatization of public sector and the monetization of assets, so-called, this national monetization pipeline, which they have announced, this is going to pose a serious threat to the working class and their organization and their unions. Of course, we are going to fight it. Already on the 16th and 17th of this month, there's going to be a 2-day strike of the banks, nationalized banks, because 2 banks are sought to be privatized. They've announced 2 of the public sector banks will be privatized. There is going to be a 2-day general strike of the country in February against this whole privatization drive. So the working class is gearing up to fight this privatization, but it is going to pose a serious challenge and threat to the trade union movement in the coming days. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Jarman has a comment to make. Dr. Jarman? Could you please unmute?
Yes.
I think there's some problem with this audio. Shall I read on your behalf? No, I'll read the comment because we're not able to hear you, sir. Thank you for your important and eloquent presentation. If Hilda David and I had heard it a year ago, we would have been honored to include it in a collection that we edited for Oxford called Text Wars, which covers some of the ground covered in your speech. But I will be happy to send you a copy. That's a comment that Dr. Jarman from Hildesheim has sent.
Thank you.
So there is one more question from Janani. Janani, can you ask your question, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can you comment on debate on federalism in the aftermath of Tamil Nadu state elections when the ruling party in the center objected to state ministers referring to the center as a union government.
Can you read it? Repeat that for me, somebody.
Yeah, I will read, sir.
Yeah.
Can you comment on the debate on federalism in the aftermath of Tamil Nadu state elections, when the ruling party at the center objected to state ministers referring to the center as a union government?
Yes, you see, attack on secularism is also accompanied by an attack on federalism in our country. Secularism, democracy, federalism, all these are three pillars. So federalism is also an inbuilt principle in our constitution, though we are not a truly federal country or system, but we have federal features in our constitution. Now, there is no doubt that the current regime is not only authoritarian, it is also centralizing all that's hostile to the federal principle and to the rights of the states. So India is a union of states. The constitution says the Indian Union. It's a union of states. But pointing out that India is a union of states itself invites the wrath of the center, which says you're trying to deny us our legitimate role as a central government or a centralized state. But I think the point being made in Tamil Nadu after the election by the DMK government was that we are calling you the union government. You see, we are state governments and you are the union government because we are a union of states in India. I think that is what invited the disapproval of the central government at that time. But that goes along with their anti-federal attitude and the tendency to centralize everything. I don't want to go into that in detail. The new education policy they have adopted also has got a strong element of centralization of all educational resources with the center. The same thing is happening in other spheres also, you see, and whether it's a question of taxes, financial resources, whether it's a question of education or other areas, you are finding the center more and more encroaching into the powers of the states and the sphere of the states.
Now over to Dr. Geeta Kanagaraj for the wrapping up.
Gentlemen and ladies, we have come to the end of the celebration of this annual event. We feel privileged and blessed to have been students of Paul Love, who combined tenderness and toughness beautifully in a style of teaching and a style of caring. The Paul Love Endowment Lecture, arranged year after year, is a humble attempt to help former students to reconnect with the postgraduate department, with the SCILET, and with the college. Though Paul Love is not with us anymore, we feel elated as we are greeted by the building where the SCILET is housed, bearing the name of the man who directed our lives. The online hat that we put on during the pandemic panic continues to be worn and has become one of convenience, for it connects us with eminent people from far off places. And we are fortunate to have got connected with Mr. Prakash Karat, a well-known politician and an author. Who did imagine that we would have an eminent author politician with us? A man who believes in being a happy human, a man who believes in true secularism. It is a timely reminder, especially now, about the need to embrace secularism as a way of life. And our dear Paul Love is a singular example of having led a truly secular life. Thank you, SCILET, for wanting to clinch the best, Mr. Prakash Karat, this awe-inspiring gentleman. Thank you, Mr. Karat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For reinforcing our faith in secularism. The old students of Paul Love are thankful to Dr. Davamani Christopher, the principal and secretary of this 140-year-old American college, the college that Paul Love adored, the college where he lived. We thank the principal for all the help and encouragement that we receive from him year after year. We fondly remember dear Professor Padmanabhan Nair, who was affectionately called Nairji, a much respected teacher, a great scholar, a man of humility and intellectual richness, and who was the director of SCILET, to whom we owe so much. This is the first year of the program without this great man being with us, who passed away last December. I sincerely thank Dr. Pramila Paul, a co-founder of the SCILET, who is an inspiring leader teacher molded by love, Paul Love. If you call out on a rapid fire list of words to describe her, this is what you will invariably have. A woman non-pareil, active 24/7, amalgamation of fun and intellectual fervor, and tough as nails. No, tougher than nails when it comes to work. It's a pleasure to watch the dedication with which this leader, Dr. Pramila Paul, works tirelessly with her squad, looking into all details, small and big, of this program, so that nothing goes amiss. Dr. Shabnam, Head and Assistant Professor of the Department of Information Technology, thank you for rendering techno support. Let me thank the SCILET team, Ebi, Ganesh Babu, Rani, Somu, Bavitra, and Jayalakshmi for continuing to nurture us, former students, and giving us a feeling of home away from home. It undoubtedly gives immense satisfaction to know that there are participants from various parts of the world attending this virtual program. I'd like to especially thank Mr. Bill Richardson for attending this endowment lecture. Thank you very much, dear participants. Let us meet again for the Paul Love Endowment Lecture Series in September 2022. Until then, wishing all of you an exhilarating academic journey. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.